So let's move over to the football team, and there's quite a lot we need to talk about. In terms of the football game, obviously Alabama wins 27-25. It was homecoming, and it started out in a way that it really felt like Alabama had a very good chance to, come out and kind of dominate this game. They scored on the first drive, and then they get the ball back immediately thereafter, after the first drive, and they get the ball back 5 plays, and then Alabama kind of stumbles a bit. They get a fumble. Alabama clearly early in this game kind of had total control, and that was until Alabama's up 14-0, right? And then on 4th and 9, Alabama gives up just a busted coverage, right? Alabama's up 14-0. South Carolina's outside of field goal range. On 4th and 9, one of the outside guys runs a post, and Malachi Moore goes with him, and the pseudo wheel route out and up just burns him, right? There's nobody covering him. He's wide open. And I don't know if this is a breakdown on Malachi Moore, not supposed to, be going with that outside receiver running the post, and he's supposed to pass him off to Keon Sabb. I don't know if a corner missed an assignment, a linebacker missed an assignment. I'm not going to point blame as to who exactly missed the assignment. But nevertheless, there is a completely busted coverage that happens on 4th and 9, and South Carolina scores to make it 14-17. Then on the ensuing kickoff, Alabama gets hit with a penalty. And that penalty backs Alabama up to the 10-yard line, which then causes Jalen Milroe to run around, and he gets hit with intentional grounding. That was the right call. And now South Carolina has completely flipped the momentum, and it's 14-9. Then Kalen DeBoer takes a timeout. Milroe makes an ill-advised throw to Cole Adams, gets picked off, and South Carolina kicks a field goal going into half, and it's 14-12. And the problem with that is Alabama had total momentum going into that 4th and 9 play, right? And just isn't able to execute, has a breakdown in coverage, and now the momentum completely shifts in South Carolina's direction, right? There's going to be some talk about timeout usage in this game, because immediately following timeouts for DeBoer, there were disasters that happened. And sure, but at the end of the day, the timeout didn't cause the disaster. The timeout was, where they saw something needed fixed, play clock, whatever the situation may be. Kalen DeBoer calls time, it's the player's job to execute thereafter. And they just didn't after timeouts, right? Personally, if I'm going to say there's an issue in this game, I think that Milroe definitely was very indecisive. I think that you've often seen with Milroe him being much more decisive, and we talked about in that Georgia game, he was replacing the blitzer with the ball, and he was doing very good things. I think part of the reason why he got so indecisive, and we talked about the South Carolina pass rush going into this game, but Kyle Kennard is an absolute animal. Absolute animal. He ends up having 2 sacks in this game and really had a ton of pressures, right? He really caused a lot of havoc in the backfield. And I just don't think Milroe ever could get truly comfortable, because South Carolina was having success rushing just 4, right? They did bring some pressures, of course, but, they were having success with their defensive ends. And that really caused major issues for Alabama, right? I think Nick Kelly put out a stat that almost every offensive lineman allowed at least 1 pressure, right? It was a situation, again, that the offensive linemen were definitely getting beat a little more often than we've seen in the past, right? Now, there is a real argument, and I think Pro Football Focus even put this out, that South Carolina may have one of the best defensive lines in the country, right? We saw South Carolina do this same thing to Kentucky. We saw South Carolina do the same thing to some other teams, but like you have to be better than that, right? And I think that pressure caused some indecisiveness, right? And it's not something we've seen out of Milroe this year, right? Typically, he's been fairly decisive with the football, right? We talked about in that Vanderbilt game, the issue was not Milroe, being indecisive. The offense, by and large, was doing fine. The defense was more of the issue. In this game, the defense definitely has had a few issues. Don't get me wrong. There absolutely were problems. Again, we just talked about a breakdown as it related to the 4th and 9. But the offense definitely was a part of the issue, right? The offense just, again, could not fully protect Milroe and have him in a pocket that he felt super comfortable with. I think part of that had to do with Milroe just not being fully comfortable with what he was seeing. I don't want to put words in his mouth, right? It just did not seem comfortable. He did not seem like the same Milroe that we saw in the Georgia game that was very decisive with the football and knew exactly what he needed to do. Again, I'm going to credit South Carolina's pass rush because I believe that had a huge piece to do with this. But it is something that's a little concerning, honestly, and definitely something that we want to look at moving forward. Then we get to the second half, and South Carolina ends up making a touchdown, and again, another long touchdown drive. This is something that we've seen that Alabama has given up a few times, right? Alabama has given up these very long touchdown drives, and it's absolutely debilitating for the defense. You have a 16-play drive. I know there were a couple of penalties on that drive. Penalties has been a huge issue for Alabama, and it's not the quantity as much as it is the timeliness, right? You have a penalty on a kickoff that backs you up to the 10-yard line. Your quarterback gets a safety. You get a penalty in a game where you're going to get off on 4th down. Now you're not. Or get off you can stop them on 3rd down. Now it's a 1st down, right? That's more where Alabama has the bigger issue is the penalties when they're happening as much as that they're happening, right? They are getting penalized at a higher rate, but it's not like it's worse in the country. It's just a timing thing, right? But obviously, if you can lower the number of penalties by and large you're getting, then they're going to happen at better times just because there's not going to be as many of them, right? I thought that Alabama's defense did do a decent job at causing turnovers in this game. They ended up forcing 3 fumbles. It was the difference in the game, right? Lenore Sellers has 2 fumbles himself as well as 1 pick to kind of seal the game. But at the end of the day, I think that the just overall physically soundness of the defense was a little better than it was in the South Carolina game, but it was not great for full 4 quarters, right? If you listen to Kane Womack speak earlier today in the press conference, they kind of hit the game-changing plays they wanted to hit. They, doubled them up on turnovers. The number of explosives, Alabama had more than South Carolina, right? So from a measurement standpoint, by and large, the defense was better, and that's definitely true. But I think from the standpoint of defense being good and just very good, what we're used to, it definitely was not at that level, right? Obviously, you win the game, but it was definitely not at the level that we needed it to be. The interception in the end zone that Jalen Milroe threw. Perfect throw, very good play on the ball, can't make that throw. Milroe just did not see that the corner, all he saw was his receiver beating the safety. It did not know the corner was playing the zone he was playing and was kind of off of the other receiver enough. Obviously, Milroe kind of thought that the other receiver was pulling that corner down enough that he could get it there. But how Milroe floated it, it was just a perfect pick, right? Definitely on Milroe 100%. I think both picks in this game, we talked about in that South Carolina game, I didn't think the pick was completely on Milroe. In this game, I would say they absolutely were on Milroe, right? The throw in at the end of the first half with 10 seconds to go at Cole Adams just was poor placement and in double coverage. The pick in the second half in the end zone to Jeremy Bernard, again, was in double coverage that he did not see. He did not see the corner playing the zone off as much as he was, that was able to make a great break on the ball and come up with the interception. Thankfully, however, the next play, Alabama forces a fumble and then scores 3 plays later, right? So that's, very thankfully after the after the mistake by Milroe, his defense gets him the ball back. We score to go up 20-19. South Carolina misses a field goal, and Alabama scores. And there's going to be a lot of talk about Alabama scoring and that Jeremy Bernard should have gone out of bounds. And Alabama wins the game 20-19. And yeah, he probably should have. And Bernard says that he was not told to go out of bounds. But if you're looking at something that could have been avoided, when Alabama's up 20-19, Milroe hits Bernard on a busted play, and Bernard probably should go out of bounds or just fall down, right? Because that would have given Alabama the ability to kneel the ball 3 times in the game and be done. And instead, what happens is Alabama scores, and then South Carolina, and I think it was a push-off, but nevertheless, they throw a ball up to Nick Harbor, and at 6'5", he makes a very athletic catch and scores what would try to end up being the game's tying play. Alabama is able to stop them on the 2-point conversion, which, again, if Bernard goes out of bounds, would have never even had the possibility of happening. But, Bernard goes out of bounds. Bernard scores. Nick Harbor ends up catching it and staying in bounds. And then we have an onside kick. And obviously onside kicks are super rare. But we have 2 tight ends, both of which that had very good chances to catch the ball. Cuevas is the one that it hits in the chest as the ball was kind of spinning. It comes off his chest, and South Carolina ends up getting the ball with a chance to drive down the field, kick a field goal, and win this game. Alabama is very, very thankful that their defensive line got their hands up and batted a ball, and South Carolina's offensive lineman caught it. Just instinctively caught the ball and tried to run with it, which took off a ton of time off the clock. And in kind of a sheer panic, at the end of the game, Lenore Sellers throws a deep ball that's picked off by Damani Jackson. So I do want to mention about the last play because I've seen stuff online, and I just want to give kind of my 2 cents on it. There were a lot of comments like Malachi Moore potentially saved the game, and I would agree, right? In principle, Malachi Moore did get Damani to come out of the end zone, which does allow the time to fully run out with Damani and the ball in his hands, and the game ends, Alabama wins. The point about Malachi telling him to come out was that Damani had caught the ball around the 3-yard line, and his momentum had taken him into the end zone. So the way that this play is technically, because it was an interception that his momentum took him into the end zone, it should have been considered a touchback whether or not he kneeled it in the end zone or not. However, I am of the mindset that it is a much better thing that he brought the ball out, because now you're not allowing the referees to make a judgment call, right? Even if he probably would have still been okay, I agree with take it out of the ref's hands, right? Since Damani runs it out, the refs don't have any call. There's no decision. There's no worried about what's going to happen. You just make the play, and now it's out in your hands and not theirs, right? So I fully agree that that is the right thing to have done. I do also understand where some fan bases are like, oh, it's not even that crazy of a play. It would have been momentum. I still would rather not have the official be able to decide, hey, it wasn't momentum. I mean, this is too much momentum, so to speak. So that's, obviously kind of the breakdown of the game. Some key takeaways. One, I don't know if it's a slide protection thing. I don't know if it's a an extra tight end thing. But when Alabama faces these super athletic pass rushers, they need to do something to make sure that Milroe is very comfortable with the ball in his hands, right, and that he has time to throw. Because by and large, outside of the pick in the end zone, when Milroe has time to throw, he's making good decisions, right? Some of his worst decisions are he's getting scrambled out and he's trying to do too much and he gets hit for a big sack, or he throws the ball away and he gets hit with the intentional grounding, right? That was some of the bigger things that we saw, right? So that's step one, right? You got to be able to protect Milroe. In my opinion, step two is also you can't fully telegraph your play calls, right? And that's offense and defense. On the defensive side, obviously, there's been a lot of talk about the amount of cover one that Alabama plays, and there was even some comments by Shane Beamer after the game mentioning we thought we were going to be able to take shots based on how the defense plays, basically saying, hey, we know you play cover one, and we're going to have some stuff dialed up. That's something that, you got to stop telegraphing at the same level that we're telegraphing right now, mixing up play calls, blitzing more. Alabama, from what some stats show, is like the least aggressive blitzing team in the entire country based on the number of times we blitz per game. That's something that's really got to change. And then in terms of the offensive telegraphing, as an Alabama fan, if I see Milroe inside the 30-yard line and it's an empty formation with a receiver pulling, it's typically a guard pull run, right? Like, I know almost immediately what the play call is, right? And thankfully, Milroe has, just super athletic and is able to beat the guys to the corner. But it's something that obviously he may have the ability to hand it to the receiver, and there's some wrinkles that can be thrown in there, absolutely. Potentially even like some sort of play action. But it happens as the run so often. I was sitting at watching the game with a bunch of friends that are not Alabama fans, and I saw the formation. I'm like, oh, it's going to be a guard pull run, and it was a center pull, but it was the exact run to the exact side that I had called. And I just know that if I'm able to call it, the defensive coordinator probably is too, right? Thankfully, Alabama was able to execute on those, but it's a little easier when the opposing team doesn't know exactly what you're calling because of the formation, right? And that's just something that has scared me on the defensive side, and I just don't want to see it become an issue on the offensive side. Another thing is Ryan Williams has to have the ball in his hands more, right? Milroe did miss him on a deep shot in the second drive, and that would have been a deep play touchdown. But by and large, Alabama has to find ways to get the ball into his hands. He's just too special with the ball in his hands. He can't go drives and drives without touching the football. I don't know what it's going to take, but again, I think that you have to get the ball into his hands in space when at all possible, right? A slant across the middle, he could take it to the house, right? It doesn't have to be the deep shot. We've seen in games he breaks a tackle, and then what he does with the ball in his hands is just absolutely magic. So he has to have the ball more. I also think Alabama needs to run the ball a little more. He was Nick Sheridan was asked about this, and they talked about just situations and Jalen obviously took some of the runs from them and just different things that they need to do. But I think Kalen agreed that we definitely do need to run the ball with the running backs maybe a little more. There's just some things I think that definitely need to be cleaned up. And I think the biggest one of those is special teams has to be cleaned up. It's not up for discussion, right? We saw in the Vanderbilt game two guys on the field at the same time with the same number. We've seen multiple fumbles on special teams. Thankfully, Alabama recovered. We have seen multiple big penalties on special teams, on kickoffs that cause major issues. Like, all in all, obviously the onside kick, which they recovered. Like, Alabama's special teams currently is a problem. A major, major problem. James Burnap and Graham Nicholson are great. I have no problems with them. James Burnap flips the field on what was a bad snap and that was dropped. Burnap and Nicholson are great. But the coverage units and the return units are major issues. There's just too many penalties. There's too much undisciplinedness on special teams. And it's something that has to be fixed. That is, in my opinion, currently one of the biggest issues with this team because it is putting the offense or defense in bad positions, right? The two numbers on the same field in the Vandy game, the defense was going to be off the field. Now the defense is back out there. They did their job, and now they have to do it again, right? The special teams getting called for the penalty, which then backs up the offense. Now the offense has to work from a bad position. Again, the offense is now put in a bad position because of the special teams. The special teams unit cannot be as bad as it currently is, right? I don't know exactly what needs to be fixed, but something has to change because currently Alabama special teams is costing them much more than they're helping them, right? Burnham has been a huge highlight. Nicholson, by and large, has been very good, but special teams has to be fixed. So that's kind of my big takeaways from this game. I'm going to put out the episode on Wednesday breaking down the Tennessee game, and so hopefully you enjoy the content and subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching, and I will catch you in the next episode. Peace.